So let's begin with lists and datasets. In order to understand what I mean, I'm going to give some concrete example and we'll try and build it. So what is a list and what are items? Because we will be designing things. So an item is something you would like to describe. So for example, a person, a news article, a grocery item. And then multiple items is what you have in a list. So I'm getting into like really basic abstract things just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. I won't go too much in depth, but I'm just giving you like a crash course. and then it'll make sense as we move more into actually using the system. So what can an item have? It can have different properties, and depending on the purpose of what this list is going to be used for, the properties might be different. I'll explain that a bit more. And then what's important is that every item has a unique identifier. No matter how many items you create, each of them is uniquely identifiable, so we can always find what it is. And when you put multiple items together, then that's what we call a list. You can filter a list, you can search a list, you can add, remove items from a list. There's lots of things you can do. So I put an example on the right. I say, let's say I'm building an app which relates to grocery items. I don't know, I'm a small grocery store, and I've decided that I want to describe an item, or I want to display a list of items. So I'll first think about, okay, what's important to me as a grocery store? If I'm talking about items, maybe I want a name and a description, an image, and then maybe I want a category because I want to be able to categorize my stuff. So then I would go ahead and think about, okay, I have these 4 types of properties, and that's what describes one item for me in my mind. It's extendable. You can add, it's not set in stone. You can always add more properties later to an item. You can modify properties. So what does that mean in practice? I could have carrot, apple, milk. That could be an item. And when I look at one item, I can see, okay, this is what this item is called, carrot. It has a description, it has an image, and you should see an image of a carrot. And obviously in this type of way of thinking, I could have multiple carrots, maybe different types of carrots. Or I could have 3 categories where this is vegetable, this is fruit, and this is dairy. Yeah, a lot of things at once, but don't worry, I'll put it into more concrete terms as to why this is important. In Appspotr terms, what does this mean? We provide something called a dataset. And what that essentially is it's a database as a service. So before I scare everyone with the term database, you can just think of it as an Excel sheet, a really fancy Excel sheet, and it's stored in the cloud and we host it for you. That's all it is. It's just a fancy way of describing that. What does it do? It allows you to describe an item, whatever it is. It can be a news article which has a title, a description, a bunch of images, links. It stores the item for you. It allows you to fetch items. It allows you to say, okay, maybe this item, when the users ask for it, should only be available at a specific time, or after a specific date, or before a specific date. I won't be able to show an example of all these things, but these are possible. And the most important thing is that from an app, you can create an item, you can read one or multiple items because you want to display them. You can update an item, and you can also delete an item. Think Facebook post, think Instagram post, think all of these things are just lists of items with varying levels of complexity, obviously. So if I come back to my Excel sheet example, just to put that into perspective, what is it is when you see columns in your table, those are the item properties. So name, description, and then each row is each item. You see, so you could take my previous example of these items and list them like this horizontally and define properties and give them descriptions. And then the whole sheet itself is the dataset or the list or the sheet in Excel words. So these two concepts, list, items, and datasets, are important because I'm going to get into an actual example of building something. Now, in terms of what's available to you with Appspotr, we have different data types, which is important. I mean, it's something you can play around with. You can just make a test data set and just try these out and see how they work with components. It's mostly because certain components require certain things. So one of the most important ones, and it's what you would use to name a fruit, for example, or to name one of my grocery items, is text. In the data types we support, there's a subset of that which is rich text. So they're roughly the same, but when I use it in a data set, the difference will be that when I say that something is rich text, you'll see there's a nice little editor where you can kind of style the text. So you could write a small little document if you wanted to. The next one is number. It's pretty standard. If you instead wanted to make an inventory system in your shop, and it was not necessarily about talking about just showing what's in your grocery store, then you would use number maybe to store the quantity of items remaining. Timestamp, which is date and time together. You can format this as you want if you don't want to show seconds and milliseconds. This could be maybe expiration date. It's up to you. Boolean, this is more coding type language, but what it essentially means is true, false, yes, no. So maybe out of stock could be something that is true or false. That's up to you. URL is pretty self-explanatory. If it's a link, you would generally make it of type URL so that it can be something that can be clicked on, navigated to. Maybe it's an external page that references the product. That image, we have a media explorer in which you can upload images. So each item can have an image or multiple images depending on how you build your app. File, so the supported file type is PDF. So maybe you have some sort of description of your grocery item and you could use file. Coordinates, and in some places it's called location. Essentially latitude, longitude coordinates. So you could display on a map. Not really sure how grocery item, how it would be relevant for that, but if maybe you had a list of shops, then those shops would have a location. That would make more sense. Again, you don't have to use them. It depends on what your needs are. And the final item is list. So that gets a bit tricky, but you can also have lists of items that you can use. And then the one I just skipped over is JSON or object or item. So we have called it JSON due to it being a standard coding name for things. It stands for JavaScript object notation, but it's essentially a single item, an item with properties. So it can get pretty nested. Items can have items. A list can have an item which has a list, etc., etc. So again, item, list, properties, data sets, similar to an Excel sheet. You see what I mean? And then each column, each property can have a data type. And that's going to be relevant when you want to build a screen to display these things. Okay. Now I'll get to the section where I build something to give you an example. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to do the most basic setup like I did last time. So you can at least get started. The first thing, maybe the most trickiest thing, is how do I create a data set? And then how do I display the items from my data set inside my app? And how do I design that view? Second thing is I'm going to show an example of a way from the app to create an item in the data set. And then using the other blocks that update or delete becomes a bit, it's pretty easy to figure out on your own. So let's start from here. Let's the goal here is just to display a list. And when I press on a list item, similar to any app, any catalog in the world, I want to press that item and I want to go and see a more detailed view of the item. Let's do that. All right, so this is my app from last time, and I might not need all these views. But I have a nice little login page, so it's good. Let's just keep this, and we'll disconnect screens if we don't need them, just to focus on the demo, right? We saw last time there's a sidebar, and we went between patchwork and views quite a few times. And then we brought up the preview. So I've already done that for you. It's out here. What you see in the back, I'll explain it later. This is the previewer iOS app. We have an Android version as well. It's currently in closed beta. So I'm just going to use that to show you the navigation flows. But we'll mainly be using this web version of the preview. All right, so we have our sidebar, and there's one thing we did not specifically open last time was data. There's quite a few things in data, and we'll cover them. We'll cover the rest of the items in the following webinars. So for now, we will go to datasets. And this is, you can have multiple datasets in an app. So this is going to be a list of datasets. So it's quite simple. It's like I showed you last time. You always have when you have a table of items, you have an action button on the top right, which allows you to do things on that list. In this sense, we're creating. Do not worry about all the different options you have. For the moment, we want to create a dataset manually with our own properties. So think of this like we're going to create an Excel sheet, or we're going to create a table, and there's no description yet. So I will take my own example and call it groceries. What did I say? Groceries should have, they should have a name. And then you see what I'm doing, the name of the data set, and then you can add as many columns as you want to describe each item. So these columns are what will describe each item. I'll get to the section that's below this once we've configured it properly. So I think if it had a name, it should be text, because I want to type in a name. What did I say next? I said that it should have a description. And for this, I will choose rich text, mainly because it gives me access to a rich text editor, and because I feel like a product like a tomato might need a bigger description. So you'll see the component that uses it, which is pretty neat. Next thing I wanted to add was also an image for the product. Yep, and my mind is, yeah, oh yeah, category. All right, there we go. That's what I was wondering. What was the last thing I wanted? Yes, category. I will show you why. There we go. So it's a pretty basic description of an item, but it has a name, description, an image, and a category. These are the properties. What you see below is not needed. We will talk about state in the next webinar. But it doesn't matter. You can keep it checked. It's not going to affect you. It's just creating these other resources on the side of the dataset to help you go faster. So what it's doing is it's also creating a list view for you in order to display the item. So you can leave that, and it allows you to change the name if you want, but I'm going to leave that as it is. All right, and I'm going to click add, and there you go. Now inside datasets, I have groceries. Inside groceries, I have nothing, but as it's, you see what I mean? It's a table essentially with details, and it's empty. It has quite a few things. You can import items from an Excel, export to Excel, manage columns, meaning you can add more, remove columns. And then you have settings to say, change the name of the dataset or start making the items scheduled. I'm not going to get into scheduled items at the moment, but it essentially allows certain items to only appear after a certain date. So again, green color button to add item. And let me add, I was going to say tomato, but that's wrong. Let's start with the apple. And I'm just going to quickly copy some lorem ipsum just to add some content. So I went to my other screen and just copy pasted some lorem ipsum. But you see, this is a rich text editor, and you can actually just like You can add your own styling to things here. You can add images inside it as well. But here it's a purely text-based description of my apple. And then I shall add an image. Oh, that is, sure, let's go to pexels.com. I use Pexels a lot because it allows me to get free to use images. So let me just quickly download that and browse image files, upload. Let's see, move that down here. Ha. I have a few images I've been playing around with there. It's a very beautiful looking apple. It's a bit dramatic even, but that should work. There we go, the image is uploading and it'll appear, selected, and fruit. It's not going to be necessary for our example, but I'm just setting it there because I'll be using it later. And there you go. You can delete the item, you can click and you can edit the item. And it's pretty standard stuff. My next item, what was it that I wanted to create now? I wanted to add this milk, and same thing, I'll also paste a bit of lorem ipsum on this guy. So lorem ipsum is just when you want to test text out, you just get that. It's interesting. All right, well, sure, I like cappuccino. So there we go. And these are photos from my slides. So again, as your app grows, as you have more and more images, this media library will be scrollable. You'll need to search things. Right now, I only have a few items. Dairy, there we go. Ba-dum. 2 items, and I had a 3rd item in mind, just to keep it different. Yes, carrot. I was initially gonna go with tomato, but then I figured that would be confusing. For the carrot, I will make a shorter lorem ipsum just to show you something. There we go. Small piece of text this time. And let's go fetch another image. Let's make sure that I use images that I'm allowed to use. There we go. And all right, my grocery app is coming along. There we go, carrots, and this I can safely say is a vegetable. Boom. There we go. It's starting to look like something. You can already see that. Yeah, it can get way more complex. You can have way more items, way more pages of items that you need to scroll through. But for the moment, we start with this. We have a data set, we have items in it. Great. You can delete, you can edit. We've seen that. You can import, you can export. We've seen that. If you have forgotten to add properties, do not worry. You can add more. You can delete, you can archive as well. Next step, once we have created our data set and added some items, let's design the list view. So similar to how you see each item here, in an app, also you have to tell the app, how should I display this item? Like each item in a list. For that, we have a concept that we briefly touched upon last time, but now we'll get to fully explore, is a list view. So common misconception, this is not a list. This is a view that is used in a list. That's what this means. And essentially, it's just that it has a shape that looks more like a list. So this is my empty view like last time. You'll notice that this time, since it was automatically created for me while I was making my data set and I had defined the columns nicely, we have automatically created the inputs for you. That speeds up the process a bit. So if you start modifying the columns, adding new columns, you will have to come in here and add inputs. The reason it's separated like this is because you can reuse list views with different data sets, with different data coming from external sources, and you need to have this flexibility and this freedom to give stuff the names that match. It will make much more sense the more you use the system. But for the moment, you see name, description, image, text. You don't have to use anything. It's more that these are available to you right now on this view. So let's start designing a view. It would be nice to show the image and just the title. I don't know if I want to show the description, but maybe what I will want to do is show the category. Why don't I do that with just 2 components? And I'm going to touch an option now, which I will explain to you in the last section of this. I'm just going to modify this view to behave a bit differently, and I'll explain how that works later. So let's move things around. Whoop. You can see the basic design I'm going for. Again, I'm sorry to all the UI UX designers out there, but I'm going a bit fast now. It's just reflex, but when you can move things around, you can resize, you can select items. And what I'm going to do now is click on the image component. And then like last time, the properties are here. One of the properties says source. Where does the image come from? Well, one of the options will be image because it comes from the inputs that are set in. This will make so much more sense when I actually show it inside the app. And maybe some of you, this makes total sense, and that's also awesome. What happens here is I want to display the name, and then I would also like to maybe show the category. But again, it's up to you how you design this. You can put different labels in different places, but I'm just going to keep it simple for this demo. All right, I do not feel like using description because what I want the user to press on the item and then take them to another page with the description. That's going to be the critical part of this. So I have designed my list view. Okay, sure. Let's add it to the patchwork and show you how that works. So there are 2 ways to display a list, actually 3 ways. I will be doing the more straightforward one today. Again, because it's the fastest thing to show right now. Oh, I need the logout, don't I? Let's disconnect these guys and make some space for my list. I'll move these down. I'll keep these screens so that when you're looking at webinar 1, so I kept the webinar 1 app and the webinar 2 app there. So then you can still understand that I move something rather than completely discombobulating the app. All right, next step, I have an empty space on my patchwork, and I would like to display my grocery items. When people are logged in, I don't want people who don't have an account to see what's in my grocery store. It's also in the add patch menu. Same as last time, we have our views from last time, home, my button screen, login. And then there's a new one. It has a slightly different icon, which says groceries. Okay, click on that. And here it is. And it has way more outputs than what we've seen before. And you don't need to worry about any of the ones below. You have already seen this guy on patch load. We've tried it out last time. When this page loads, this triggers. What we are going to use now is another one of these, so that when someone clicks, you can do something. But you see there are others. All right, I have my patch here. The first thing to do is to go down slightly, scroll, and you'll see there's a property called list source. And we want this to come from our groceries dataset. Again, the reason to keep these 2 things separate is because it's just a coincidence that this is called groceries. This could have been called standard list design view. And then depending on where the data comes from, you can use this design. It's a design of a list, of any list of items that would have those property names. So these are kept separate. As you can see, it's a list, so it can grow. You can have many more data sets. You can have external data sources. So it's been kept like that. Maybe we'll put a capital. There we go. Now it's configured, but it's not going to appear anywhere until I do this. Same as last time, I dragged from the menu to the screen that I wanted to connect together, and both patches are connected, and now it's a part of this menu. For the demo's sake, what I'm going to do is pull the groceries up. I didn't do this last time. This is the order of the tabs in here, left to right, top down. So if you want it to be the first screen you come on, do that. I am going to change this to be a drawer menu, just because I'm going to add a few more screens, and I want to have the space. This is going to get a bit cramped if I have more than 4 or 5 tabs. So I have drawer set now. I have my groceries, and it's configured with a list source, or is it? All right, let's make sure it's configured with a list source. All good, and we refresh our app. I'm already logged into this app, so I should be taken straight to this screen. So a lot of things happen there. This list view is automatically configured to fetch the items from my dataset. It fetched them from my dataset because I configured on the list view to say, hey, where we go? Yeah, the list source is the groceries from dataset. Why does it display things like this? It's because it uses the list view that I designed. Let's see. And I said that, hey, I should have an image here, and I should have text here. See, name dash category. So you see name dash category. And it's really up to you how you can organize this data. You can make it look less ugly than what I did. And you can see that it matches what's here. Let's mess around with it a bit. I will add a second E to Apple and save. And then you see, it's there, ta-da. But imagine this is now one app, but imagine all the users. We'll refresh and it's there. Let me fix my mistake. I made a typo, boom, and it's there. So I'm just gonna let that sink in a bit. It's pretty standard. You can think of this even like Instagram has a home screen or a home view with all the posts. These could be post designs, and you could have a list of them. That's also fine. I could configure it to do different things as well. I'll show you later. But right now, what I want to do is do the second part of this. I want to be able to click on an item. Right now, I'm clicking and nothing's happening. I want to see the description of this fruit. Like, I'm excited. So how do we do that? We need to design another view and connect it to this one. You're guessing that it should be on item select. See these events? There's a standard on something, something, something. On refresh, see? What this means is, oh, when I do this, something should happen. Everything is event-based. Everything is about passing data. So let's design a screen where I can show my grocery item details. Yeah. And I'm going to do this on purpose, but I'm going to design inputs which have different names just to show you that it's not necessarily about the name of the item. Okay. We have created a view. We need to create inputs. So what that means is I need to tell this view that it should expect something to arrive. It should expect something to come in. What should I call it? Item name. I'm doing this on purpose just to teach you that it's not necessarily about having the same name when you map things. All right. But the main thing was description after all. I'll keep this guy the same. Text, image. I'll keep all the others the same. Just wanted to show you with name, that's it. Did I want to show category? Sure, why not? Which is also text. Let's do a quick design. Image at the top, there, and text. This is important. Rich text for the rich text, and do the same thing as before. So it's the same concept. You're gonna click on a component and edit the properties and update the source to match what's coming in. So you see everything is very self-contained, meaning you can reuse things. You can connect views and patches to different sources. You're not, everything is not so tightly integrated, which also makes things slightly more complicated. But there's always a trade-off with flexibility. So I'm going to do the same thing. I like displaying my category next to the title of my thing. And this is, you can either type in some rich text yourself, or we can put in this guy. So it's really important to have these brackets, these curly braces, they're called, surrounding the name of the thing that we're sending in. You see, this is what tells the app, hey, we're trying to put something here, you should display something here. And for demonstration's sake and for later, I'm going to put again, my trusty unicorn icon below. There we go. And you're wondering now, oh, there's a lot of lorem ipsum text. This guy's going to be in the way, but you'll see. That's not necessarily the case. All right, just double checking that everything's connected. Everything's there. Everything's defined. And I'll move on to the next step of placing this on my patchwork so that we can click on it. Again, coming back to patchwork, clicking add patch, grocery item details. This is the one I just created. And placing it more or less aligned so it's easy to see. And then it's the same thing, except we're going to go from on item select. So when I select an item, go into this view. And it's the same thing you saw last time with the login screen and logic block, except here it's from a view to another view, or from a list view to another view. But I'll show you later that that doesn't matter. You can also do view to view. All right, and now I did this on purpose. It's called item name. But here, this is where I say where things come from. I say no. The name of the grocery item should go to item name on this view, you see? So these could be more generic terms, not necessarily related to groceries, if you want to really get reusable. But here, I'm specifically designing a grocery app, so I'm going towards item name. Here we go, description, image to image, category to category. This is pretty straightforward stuff. When I click an item here, pass name, description, image, category to the next screen's inputs, and the screen will display them. And that should be it. Let's refresh. All right, now we should be able to do the next thing and click. And there we go. And you see how this rich text component expanded. So the unicorn is down here. And if I go into an item which had less description, it's going to be up here. If I go into an item with a bit more, it's down here. And you can scroll it, nice and scrollable. See, and this is the name, this is the category. So again, there's a lot you can do with this. I'm maybe not making the best case for it by designing it such a simple way, but this is the basis for most apps. List of items, you click, you go into a detailed view. Again, you can click here and go into another one. As I showed you with navigation, you can put as many things, right? So you could go deeper and deeper and deeper into something. Okay. That completes the last step of this. And next, I wanted to show you how to create an item in a data set. And I'm going to make sure I speed it up a bit. It's actually going to be a lot on this section. So creating an item, it's the same concept. I need somewhere where the user can enter data. I need somewhere where they can trigger some sort of logic that's going to create the item. And then I need to pass the data. And then there's this concept of permissions, which I'll explain why. Okay, this got really advanced all of a sudden. Let's keep it simple. I'm not going to show you necessarily all the types of data. Let's keep the grocery item add item. Let's keep it simple. Let's do the same thing we did for the login screen. Let me just type in the name and the category. Yeah, I'm gonna keep it super simple. Otherwise, we're gonna exceed the time. But I could add image. I could add more content. Okay, same concept as before. I want something to go out. I want the name to be sent out. What else do I want? The category to be sent out. Da-da-da. That's it. These two text inputs. I'm going a bit faster now because we've done this before, but this would be the name. It's just a placeholder, but you might want to go to output here and connect it to name so that it goes to the proper one. I can do the same thing on category. Ta-da. Now both are connected, and final touch is I need to be able to press on something. So there's an event that's triggered, and I'm adding an icon just to indicate that it's pressed. So I have a button. Again, I need something that triggers, right? So on item add. Not the best use of that. An event, like I did last time. It's here. And now on the button, I need to say, hey, when I press this button, I should trigger the onAdd function. What that function is, this view doesn't need to know. All it knows is that the button is now connected to that event. There we go. Basic, very basic view. Let's put this onto the patchwork. I will move some stuff around. There we go. Let's create some space. Again, adding patch. We add grocery item screen. Let me put it here. Let me connect the menu item here. And then let me use one of the logic blocks, the many logic blocks that you can do on a dataset. You can add to dataset, you can remove, you can update, you can also fetch and fetch a single item. These will become relevant when I show you at the next webinar, how to use state and storage and variables. But for the moment, we want to use the add. So this is a piece of logic that when it is triggered, we'll add a new item into the dataset, and therefore here. Same concept, on item add should trigger add to dataset. Oh, but there's nothing here. Why? Because it doesn't know, could be any dataset in your app. You say groceries, and then it knows, oh, for a grocery item, I have all of these fields. So for the sake of our example, I have showed name and I have showed category. So let me only connect those. And there we go. So this should give us a basic example. I'm going to avoid doing something on purpose to showcase something. There we go. So my guy is logged in. Add grocery item ends up being down here. Let's say I wanted to add tomato and say that it's fruit. But in a grocery store, it won't necessarily be there. And when I click, nothing happens. And if you were to check the logs even, you would see that something is wrong. It doesn't work. So let me go back to my grocery list and see, oh, it's there. I didn't put a spinner on this view. You see, you don't really see that anything is happening because I didn't put a spinner, if that makes sense. All right. There we go. We have an item. We have no image because I didn't set an image, and there's no description because I didn't set a description. So the view that you go into is going to be blank. But these are things you can build on this page. You can add more. You can add the image upload. You can add the description so that you can add more items in there. Let me double check. And it's here. It just has empty items. That's not too much a big deal. Let's fix that really quickly and add a description, and I'll select an image really quickly. There we go. Clean that up a bit. So you see, you're playing around with a mini database. You're playing around with data, and you can manipulate it from the app or from the CMS, depending on that. And what I wanted to show next, and I left out on purpose, is certain people can and cannot do certain things in the app. I know what happened. All right. I'll leave that for next time. Essentially, there is a way for you to prevent certain people from creating items and editing items and deleting items in your app. And you can create different levels of access in the app. I'll leave that for a next webinar. I'll avoid that right now. So I built a list. I built a screen to add items to the list. So it kind of shows you how you can use that. There we go. We did those two things. There's a lot more things I can do with the list. I can make it searchable. I can make sure that I show only the grocery, only the dairy, or only the vegetables, or only, different categories of items. If you want to have a category page that takes you into a details page, it's filtering.